of the piano is an involved one, embracing the ingenuity of instrument builders, the skill of cabinet makers, the aspirations of virtuosi and composers. The piano we know today has reached a high standard of perfection. Because it's entered into almost everybody's life, we take it for granted without wonderment. Yet it's taken nearly 200 years of constant development to reach this perfection. Our story takes us back to 18th century England, where the spinet or harpsichord had remained unchallenged as the domestic keyboard instrument for very many years. There was, however, an older keyboard instrument, rarely found in England but popular in Germany, called the clavichord. It was much more expressive than the harpsichord, but had a very small tone. Its strings were struck, not plucked. Many musicians had wished for an instrument combining the expression of the clavichord with the tonal power of the harpsichord. And in 1709, a Florentine named Cristofori made just such an instrument. He called it the harpsichord con piano e forte. Each string was struck by a hammer which fell back, leaving the string free to vibrate. Here then was the prototype of a keyboard instrument which was to supersede all others, and England contributed significantly to its development in the latter half of the 18th century. At that time, although it was fashionable to attend concerts in London, music was not considered a serious art, and musicians had a very low status. A letter to a young man in 1788 reads, "What glory is it to a gentleman that he can strike a string or touch a key with the grace and command of an hired musician?" The cartoonist Gilray shows no respect for the art. But for the ladies, thought to be a mite below the gentlemen intellectually, a modest accomplishment on the instrument was considered very proper. After J.C. Bach, music master to George III's Queen Charlotte, had popularized the instrument with his concert performances, keyboard music carried the words for harpsichord or pianoforte. Muzio Clementi, who made his name in England as a composer, virtuoso and later piano maker, was one of the first to fully exploit the new instrument in his compositions. By 1790, the harpsichord's popularity was over. Among the instrument makers at that time was a Swiss called Burkhard Tschudi. Mr. Tschudi had a talented Scots apprentice, John Broadwood, who married his daughter and eventually took over the family business. Broadwood improved the pianoforte by extending the keyboard, fitting sustaining and soft pedals, and devising an entirely new action with a much more powerful stroke. This became known as the English action and was famous throughout Europe. Beethoven's compositions and performances were too big for Viennese pianos, and on his 48th birthday, he was delighted with the gift of a Broadwood. He writes to Broadwood, thanking him for the gift. "I will send you the fruits of the first moments I shall spend with it as a remembrance, my dear B, and I only wish that they be worthy of your instrument." His last 3 sonatas were composed after he received the Broadwood. This is the first movement of his last sonata, opus 111, and perhaps the final low C can be looked upon as a tribute to the English manufacturer who was making the finest pianos in the world. steam and progress. Looking back from our day, the tempo of life in the 19th century might seem relatively leisurely. To the Victorian, it was breathlessly fast and exciting. Everywhere, workshops were becoming factories. The machine was completely altering manufacturing methods. The Victorian was fascinated by the versatility, the ingenuity of the power-driven machine, the speed and accuracy with which it could work. To build a piano action then and today requires the making and bringing together of some 4,000 parts. The action's abundance of similar parts, its many identical keys, jacks, hammer shanks, made it particularly suitable to the new mechanical techniques of the age. In the assembly of a piano action, however, there are many operations which even today no machine is able to undertake as effectively as the human hand. A sharp eye, sensitive touch, skillful fingers are still needed to assemble and adjust the piano action, that miracle of ingenuity which has altered hardly at all since the end of the 19th century. In an age dedicated to the machine, can one wonder that the pianoforte was so popular? It was produced in great numbers, in a wide variety of styles, and it found its way into every kind of home. It became the hallmark of respectability in nearly all families, and in the higher social strata, the more elaborate instrument became a status symbol. By the turn of the century, total production of instruments was calculated at over 23,000 a year. A greater number of people than ever before were playing and enjoying the piano. At the end of the 19th century, the piano underwent its last major development. A method of casting an iron frame in one piece was devised. The iron frame made possible the use of much thicker strings, tuned to a tension that would have laid the old wooden frames in ruins. This increased the volume and flexibility of the piano's tone and influenced a new era of virtuosity. Whether it be a wild outburst of sound or the simplicity of a single note, only a perfect soundboard will ensure purity of tone. The soundboard of the piano is constructed of well-seasoned wood. Silver spruce is largely used because it responds particularly well to vibration. The board is made to arch very slightly. This gives it greater sensitivity than a flat board. The bridge, made from specially selected beech, is stuck to the soundboard. Lancewood slats, called go bars, are used to hold the bridge firmly in position while the glue sets. The knights and bowmen of Old England used the same wood for their lances and long bows. The soundboard is now glued to what will be the back of an upright piano. Every operation in piano making requires a special skill. The craftsman has to know his materials, understand their behavior, and the results of his precise work. No other industry offers greater scope to the young man who seeks to satisfy an instinct for craftsmanship. The soundboard now has to be wedded to the iron frame and strung like a harp. A tuning plank has been fitted to the underside of the iron frame, and holes are drilled for the tuning pins. The iron frame then temporarily meets the soundboard while the positions of the bridge pins are marked up. These pins will hold the strings in firm contact with the bridges. They must be exactly in line with the strings. The bridge is carved, giving it a slope so that the bearing of each string, which must dip slightly like a violin string over its bridge, is perfectly controlled. The total down bearing of each string is approximately 880 pounds. This must be distributed evenly over the whole of the soundboard, ensuring that it vibrates sensitively. The iron frame and the soundboard have been brought together, and now the piano must be strung. The string is measured, deftly wound onto a tuning pin, which is then hammered into the tuning plank beneath the iron frame. At this stage, the piano receives its very first tuning. Chipping up, it's called, and is often done by trainee tuner technicians. In the meantime, the casework for the piano is being veneered, stained, and polished. The piano casework is built round the soundboard, which can be considered the heart of the piano. But until the action is fitted, the piano cannot be brought to life. Although both actions and keyboards are usually made by specialist firms and supplied to the piano maker, they have to be individually fitted, regulated, and adjusted to each piano. The operation is a delicate one and requires the full attention of a highly skilled craftsman, involving him in many hours of careful work. The action is set up. The dampers are adjusted accurately. Each hammer is carefully fitted. The keyboard is fixed in position. The balance of every key must be carefully checked and corrected. The keys are then adjusted for depth of touch, which is governed by felt washers under each one. The keys must also be perfectly level. A final tuning, and the piano is ready to leave the factory. Like their ancestors of the 18th century, British pianos travel. Today, safely crated and shipped, they go east and west, north and south, to all parts of the world. Built to the needs and requirements of the 20th century, they're as various in size and shape as they were in the Victorian age. But today, with so many forms of entertainment available, are there still people who like to possess a piano for the pleasure of playing it? Production figures show an increase of 15% over the last 5 years, and the piano is no longer a status symbol. Piano owners are almost certainly piano players. Most schools offer facilities for learning the instrument, and in quite a number of them the piano class is taking the place of the private lesson, giving children the idea that music is something to be shared, to be enjoyed together.
Now wait a minute, Tristan, you made a mistake. Now what was it?
Forgot the rest.
She forgot the minim rest. Do you all see it on your boxes? Well, now we're going to do it again. And you're all going to count with me, and I'm going to point on the blackboard, and you three can see the board, so you can watch this, because it's much bigger and easier to see. Right, now take it again this time, and don't forget all count. Ready? Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Ah, now stop a minute. Look there, you had your finger on a crack. Now you must be careful not to do that, it makes an ugly sound. So I want you to play it again with your finger always in the middle. Be especially careful with that part. I'll give you 3 to start with, now you see what you can do. Now Michael, once more. 1, 2, 3.
The piano has always been an instrument to be enjoyed on its own. It can also make a contribution to the efforts of the whole family.
Upon the bell rope fast there was no ting-a-ling. They could not get their business done, the curfew wouldn't ring. Upstairs Cornell was swinging, while below they pulled and heaved. When suddenly a voice cried, "Stop, the gate has been reprieved! Hang on the bell, Millie, hang on the bell."
For nearly 200 years, young and old have danced to the sound of the piano in their homes. But to reach the end of our story, we return to its beginning. The piano grew out of a need for an instrument with a great range of feeling and a big enough tone to be heard in concert with other instruments. In this role, it has exceeded the dreams of its early pioneers. It remains the supreme instrument.